Tonight on All In.
We're looking today at temperatures that are going to be 110 in Seattle. That's 37 degrees above average.
107 at Portland International right now. That equals Portland's all-time record high ever.
This is just unprecedented heat wave.
When climate change becomes the top story, the off-the-charts heat wave threatening lives and businesses across the Northwest, while Republicans push to keep possible solutions off the table. Then the clock is ticking for Trump as prosecutors give his business 24 hours to come up with a defense. Plus,
if you have wholesale mail-in voting, it substantially increases the risk of fraud.
After pushing the voter fraud myth for most of 2020, Trump's attorney general is trying to whitewash his reputation. And All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It was 115 degrees Fahrenheit in Portland, Oregon today, breaking yesterday's record of 112 degrees. To state the obvious, it should not be 115 degrees in Portland. Normal high temperatures at this time of the year in the city are in the low to mid 70s. This is not just happening in Portland, as you may have seen. Oregon's capital city of Salem also reached 114 degrees. Seattle, Washington hit a record-breaking 107 degrees today. In fact, the weather across the Pacific Northwest of the United States is downright dystopian right now. Like something out of a climate science fiction novel, but a peek into our climate future that is now made present. All this is happening because of a phenomenon called a heat dome, where high pressure in the atmosphere traps hot ocean air, kind of like a lid. Heat domes are not uncommon in the summer. They account for heat waves, but this one is incredibly intense and vast, the kind of extreme weather event that climate change is making more and more common. The National Weather Service in Seattle put out this straightforward warning last night. I'll read it to you. Quote, with morning lows already starting in all-time record territory, temperatures will skyrocket at sunrise. As there is no previous occurrence of the event we're experiencing in the local climatological record, it's somewhat disconcerting to have no analogy to work with. Temperature records will fall in impressive fashion. No analogy for this in the entire climatological record. You know, the National Weather Service is an incredible part of our government, right? Staffed by civil servants, local branches known as weather forecast offices nationwide. It's their job to essentially be our climate watchmen and women. And here they are, you know, standing sentry on the wall, waving a huge red flag, warning us of approaching danger. Some of those offices around the country have approached this event with a kind of jocular gallows humor. The Las Vegas branch tweeting yesterday, quote, looks like the odds of Portland tying Las Vegas's all-time record, 117 degrees tomorrow, is 17%. National Weather Service in Portland, do we need to remind you that heat is our thing? The Austin, Texas office noting that Portland's all-time record high of 112 yesterday is also the record high in their city, in Austin. This meteorologist pointed out that Portland was expected to be hotter than 99.8% of Earth yesterday, with only the Sahara Desert, the Persian Gulf, and California's deserts reaching higher temperatures. So those are the numbers, and they're all kind of mind-blowing, but the effects are even more brutal. Put simply, humans cannot function very well in this kind of heat. We have not evolved to deal with 112 degrees. Pacific Northwest, where summers are usually pretty temperate and many people do not have air conditioning, well, it sure as heck is not designed for it.
You didn't have to go far in Portland to find people impacted by this record-breaking heat. We met Wendy checking into the Crystal Hotel downtown.
I am here because we don't have air conditioning and it's so hot and we wanted to give our dog a chance to cool off.
She said paying for a two-night stay was way less costly than buying an AC unit.
These are the lines to check in at the DoubleTree near SeaTac on Saturday. And a search for a hotel in Seattle this weekend through Monday shows room after room sold out.
On that same block, Zeus Cafe also had to close early.
Mainly for the safety of my staff, so we want to make sure that we only have minimal equipment running.
Lots of other places had to close too. The Oregon Zoo shut down at 12:30 Sunday because it's too hot for the animals and customers. It'll close early Monday, too.
TriMet has suspended all MAX services until tomorrow morning because of the heat.
We also know that the Portland streetcar is going to be out of commission until Tuesday as well. You can see this picture, how the cable melted from the record-breaking heat we had on Sunday and will continue to have today.
So in the midst of all this, everything's shutting down left and right? Remember, we're just 25 days from the start of the already postponed Tokyo Olympics. They're happening in 2021. And it just so happens the University of Oregon in Eugene just hosted outdoor Olympic trials yesterday. These final competitions were held to determine which athletes will represent the United States in the track and field events. Temperatures in Eugene were well over 100 degrees when an athlete in the heptathlon competition fainted just before the javelin throw. She had to be wheeled off the field. The trials were delayed by 5 hours, resuming only after the worst of the afternoon heat had passed. Again, the human body is just not designed for any kind of exertion at these temperatures. Even elite Olympic level athletes cannot do it. It doesn't work. And more of the world will be catapulted into that red zone of physiological danger day by day, week by week, year by year. Okay? So that is one story from this weekend. And the other big story that was playing out in Washington, D.C., which you may have followed, may have seen some news about, is the bipartisan infrastructure deal. Remember, it was negotiated by a group of moderate Republicans, so-called, and Democrats. And the bipartisan bill is smaller considerably than what Joe Biden initially proposed. But the idea that was announced last week is that it would pass alongside an additional larger spending bill that would only need Democratic votes. Republican leadership is now coming out in staunch opposition to precisely that plan. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell pushing back, claiming Democrats want to hold a bipartisan bill hostage over a separate and partisan process. Now, this may seem like the normal thrust and parry of legislative compromise, but let's remember the issue at the center of this entire thing, this whole debate, is that President Biden's original infrastructure proposal included more than $300 billion in climate-specific investments. That has now all been pulled out of the bipartisan deal and moved into the additional bill the Democrats would pass by reconciliation. Think about this. We are talking about a bipartisan infrastructure bill for 21st century America. What do you think are the most pressing infrastructure questions we face? The way we generate energy, the way we use energy, and the way we harden ourselves against climate disasters so that, I don't know, streetcar cables don't melt. Those are the things at the center of infrastructure. And as investigators sift through what happened at that building that collapsed in Miami last week, right, that catastrophic failure is actually a reminder of our incredible civilizational achievements through technology and regulation and laws and bureaucracy and inspections, right? We have built this impressive structures that almost never fall down. That's the norm we are accustomed to in the built environment. And this disaster warns us of the catastrophe that looms if that starts to go away. And we are now entering an era in which the pressures on every built structure will be increased by the driving story of the century, the warming planet. So think of the utter madness of surveying this world we live in and thinking about what kind of infrastructure the federal government should invest in, should build, develop, invest, and deciding, you know what, let's get rid of the climate stuff. That's what the Republicans and the Democrats who cut the deal did. And the question now is, will Democrats actually be able to pass another bill that includes the climate stuff? Because if they do not, then none of it's worth doing. There is no distinction between an infrastructure bill and a climate bill. They're the same thing. Just go ask the people of Portland. Trina Jensen is the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service in Portland, Oregon, and she joins me now. Trina, I wonder if you could just give us a little update on where things stand there today. I saw that a new record was hit in Portland today, and it looked like it was another really brutal day.
Yeah, currently it's 115 degrees in Portland, and it's hot. And it's not just Portland. We set all-time new records in Seattle, I believe 5 in the Seattle metro area. Medford, Oregon has tied their all-time record. And what's really amazing is that these unprecedented, dangerous temperatures we're seeing in June. So this is really early in the summer season for us to get this kind of heat. And here in Portland, this is the 3rd consecutive day that we have set the all-time highest temperature record. And we're not just breaking these records by a few degrees. In some places, we are just destroying these records. There's a location in Quileute, Washington, where today they broke the all-time temperature record by 11 degrees. That is the highest temperature difference for breaking a record that we've ever seen in our country.
In history, that delta between previous record and new record being 11 degrees, as that itself is a record. It's a record-breaking record.
Yeah, and it's not the only site that has broken that record so far. And I have to remind you that it's 5 p.m. here in Portland and Pacific Northwest, and our temperatures could rise another degree or so before, so this is all preliminary information. But Hoquiam, another site in Washington, has broken their previous all-time record by 8 degrees. So that also breaks the all-time record difference that we've ever seen. So so far we have 2 stations that have shown extreme, just blowing away our all-time high temperatures.
I mean, this is dangerous stuff for people, right? I mean, I know you guys issue heat advisories, and obviously there's a real physical threat. There's a famous heat wave in Chicago that killed hundreds and hundreds of people that hit nowhere near this kind of heat. I mean, there's real, genuine physical danger posed by this, right?
This is incredibly dangerous. We have 25 million people that are under either a heat advisory, heat watch, or heat warning. And most of the people in the Pacific Northwest are not used to these temperatures. And like I said, especially in June, we have had no time to acclimate. Not many of the homes have air conditioning. We have a very large homeless population, and it's very dangerous. So people are using up hotels. Air conditioners have been sold out. Fans are sold out. A lot of people have gone to the coast, but it's impossible to find a hotel at the coast where it's cooler. I know a lot of my friends are kind of grouping together in homes that have air conditioning. People are going to lakes in the mountains. I mean, people are doing whatever they can to cool. And the community, the local emergency managers have opened up several cooling stations throughout the whole Pacific Northwest to give people a place to come in and get relief from heat.
Trina Jensen, who is doing really important work there in the Pacific Northwest amidst these awful conditions. Thanks for making a little time in a very busy day for us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Okay. I want to bring in Governor Jay Inslee of Washington State, who you may remember ran a very climate-focused campaign for president in the 2020 Democratic primary and has been dealing with a lot of challenges in his state, from COVID now to this. Governor, let's just start with the kind of public health and logistical challenges posed by heat this extreme in your area, what it means for keeping people safe, the grid, everything in your state.
Well, I think some people think, well, we'll just strap on a few more air conditioners and we'll be fine. Doesn't work. Our grid system's now being shut down in places because of this excess of heat. I just got a notice from one of my utilities in Spokane that 8,000 people have been cut out from electricity. The air conditioner not doing them any good right now. We, of course, have done the cooling centers as much as humanly possible. We have shared information with our citizens about heat stroke and how to recognize it and what to do about it. But we've got to recognize we were not built for this heat bomb. Climate change has dropped a heat bomb on the Pacific Northwest. We're called the Evergreen State for a reason. It's moderate, it's cool, it drizzles quite often. We were not meant for this. And so you have a whole infrastructure, a whole economy, a whole culture built on moderate temperatures. So this is very dangerous. And you got to understand, there's a lot of people can't avoid this. They work outside. Some of us get to work inside where we do have air conditioners. But our whole society is built on our agricultural industry, our construction industry, and being able to work outside. We are not prepared for that. So right now, what we're seeing is the harbinger of a future that is now upon us. And, I'll be talking to the president Wednesday about our forest fire threats that are just beginning to heat up. And we know that the most important issue in America today is our ability for Congress to pass robust, comprehensive, aggressive climate change legislation, which won't happen unless we get this reconciliation bill through.
I want to talk about in a second, but just to stay on this for a second, because you mentioned the drought. We just showed the drought monitor map we're already seeing, and again, Trina was talking about the fact that this is just June that we're seeing these records, right? We're seeing incredibly anomalous levels of dryness for June, right? Really, really worrying for what it means and for the entire, west of the Colorado River part of the United States, which is this kind of amazing achievement of hydrological engineering by the Army Corps of Engineers. But I mean, you're staring down the barrel right now, you and all those Western governors, Democrat, Republican alike, of a very difficult situation, even past this heat dome.
Yeah, this is a whole West emergency. Of course, you've heard about the Southwest and the Colorado system with the historic absence of water, but it is in the Klamath River Basin in Oregon, where agricultural people are not going to have water this year, in part because of these low flows. It is my state where it is so dry. I just talked to some friends the other day that may lose a substantial part of their crops in southeastern Washington. Our cherry harvest is threatened right now because of this excessive heat, even before we get to water shortages. So this is a Western United States problem. And the problem is, if this was a one-off, if we're going to get through this and we're going to go back to normalcy next year, but that's not the case. This is the beginning of a permanent emergency. And that is why it is so disturbing. Our entire West is built on irrigation. And if we don't have that, we don't have an economy. Our agricultural base is based on having moisture in topsoil, much less to have irrigation supplies. And our forest fires our forests are just ready to blow up right now. And we're looking at a permanent situation. That's why we have to attack the source of this problem, which is climate change.
Yeah, and you mentioned the bill, and obviously the sort of huge chunk of the climate investment that was in the initial proposal is not in that sort of negotiated deal. This back and forth about whether there'll be a side deal. I mean, what's striking to me when I zoom out and I think about what your state is facing, the maths we're looking, is that it's like $300 billion in the scheme of the cost. Does not seem like that much money. We passed a COVID relief package for like $2 trillion. Like, we're talking $300 billion for climate investment. We're talking about the scope of what we are all facing. It seems like madness to me to take that out of a compromise bill.
The vast majority of the climate-related issues were stripped out of the bill in infrastructure. Unfortunately, because Republicans still can't get over their refusal to recognize the necessity of action on climate. This is why it is absolutely necessary to be assured that the full measure, the clean energy, clean electricity standard, the investments in clean fuels and electric cars, the investments in efficiency that can put so many carpenters and sheet metal workers to work. We have to be assured that those will be in the reconciliation package, or these cannot move. Look, having a quote infrastructure bill in 2021 that ignores climate change is like having a infrastructure bill that ignores canals in 1860 and ignored interstate freeway in 1950. This is central to the future of the systems that support us, both physically and economically. So I am proud of the people that are being loud and proud right now that are insisting that this be in the reconciliation package. And I have to tell you, there are some concerns, and I'm very appreciative of the president's leadership on this. He has been bold. I think he gets this. He's committed to this. But there have been some stuff coming out of his administration suggesting that this infrastructure bill was a climate bill. It isn't half a climate bill. It isn't 10% of a climate bill. We need a real climate bill that has to come through reconciliation, and we need to both move together. So I am hopeful that that voice will prevail to make sure that we trust but verify that we're going to get this done in reconciliation. Nothing else is acceptable. Look, there's some things you can put off a few years or even a decade. This is not one of them. This is our last chance for our species to save ourselves. We got to get this job done this year in Congress.
Governor Inslee, state of Washington, thinking about all the folks up there in your part of the country, wishing you all well. Thanks for making some time with us tonight.
Send ice and good climate legislation. Thanks, Chris.